Hello, everyone, and welcome to Delta Waterfowl's The Voice of the Duck Hunter podcast. I'm your host, Joel Bryce. On today's podcast, we're going to talk about one of Delta's feature hunter recruitment programs, our university hunting program. But before we get going, I want to make sure that everyone is aware that there are other Delta Waterfowl podcast episodes out there. You can access those past episodes through our website, through YouTube, or if you're like me and prefer an audio download, you can find those episodes on Apple, Spotify, or TuneIn. So I suspect that today's topic is going to take many of our listeners by surprise. I'm guessing you've heard that continentally, hunter numbers have been on a steady decline. But what you probably didn't consider is that an increasing majority of today's wildlife management students, who are going to be future wildlife management decision makers, have come to college with little to no exposure to hunting, many with hopes of landing a wildlife management or biologist position. So to help discuss Delta's large and growing partnership effort to help reverse this trend, we have two great guests today. We have Dr. Dave Koons, who is a professor at Colorado State, and we have Rachel. You just told me your name, so I'm going to try it again. Rachel Kanaziz. You say it.
Close.
You say it.
Kanaziz.
Kanaziz, dang it. I even tried to write it out so I wouldn't miss it, but I did. But Rachel's a past university hunting program participant, but she's also a current graduate student at Colorado State, right?
Correct.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Dave, and welcome, Rachel. So, Dave, you do have to talk about that background.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, you have to talk about that background there for sure. Tell us a little about that.
Okay. This is our 2020 background shot from a pit blind just 2 days ago, our 2020 University First Hunt experience for Colorado University students here. I make a shout out to our outfitter, Luke Schmidt, and his friend and partner, Austin Cosman. They've been with us lockstep of the way ever since starting this program 3 years ago. And we can kind of get into why it's, we feel that it's very important here in our program here to collaborate with an outfitter, because it has a lot to do with this access issue, and we'll dive into that. And you can tell from that background, the decoys are right in front of the blind, and those birds are not far behind it. And that continued for 30 continuous minutes. After they stopped, there were 2,000 birds in the field.
Wow! I promise you, for the rest of the day, every door squeak or every noise you heard, it was a goose, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, and dreams for days to come.
That's crazy. That is crazy. So, hey, do you guys listen to podcasts at all? Do you listen to a podcast in your personal life?
I
do sometimes.
Yeah. I do too. I don't know. I feel like I want to learn. If I'm going to spend my time, I want to learn something. So yeah, it is kind of fun, to pull off a podcast and listen to it while driving, somewhere, or if working in the shop, or just having it in the background. So that's cool. So welcome to Delta Waterfowl's podcast. Yeah, one of the things that's a tradition here is we want our listeners to identify with you guys. We want them to know who you are. We want to learn a little bit about your background. So, Dave, I'd love to start with you. Go all the way back. Where are you from? Just give us an overview. If you have a family, share it with us. Talk about your academic and professional background as well.
Yeah. I'll go way back to growing up. Kind of a common feature of waterfowl biologists is that a lot of us grew up in Minnesota. A lot of duck hunters in Minnesota. And I had the good fortune of growing up in a family that was interested in fishing and hunting, hiking, backpacking, camping, skiing. We were in the outdoors often. And like a lot of Minnesota families, most of us grew up somewhere near the Twin Cities, but we had a cabin up north. And almost every weekend, we went on that journey towards the Leech Lake area where our cabin was, which kind of provided that relief each week to get outdoors. And depending on the season, we were doing different things. So like most hunters, I grew up hunting. I grew up fishing. And before I was allowed to carry a gun, I was going out with my parents and experiencing it, and I became hooked on it. So much so, by my teenage years, I started to think, how could I pursue a career that relates my passion for the outdoors, and especially wildlife, and especially waterfowl, with a job. And, it wasn't until later that I kind of found that path. But I left home and I emigrated to Montana State University, where I pursued a bachelor's degree in biology. And I found all the things I love were at another level in Montana, but the academics were good too, and received a good training there. And kind of halfway through it, I realized that there was an aspect of biology known as wildlife management that was a special interest to me. I'm fortunate enough to have a decent kind of natural skill for mathematics and statistics, and found a few people that said, hey, there's a need for that in wildlife sciences and wildlife management. And they started talking to me about the steps needed to go to graduate school. My professor for ornithology, Dr. Jay Rotella, was a Delta student himself in the 1990s. And he put me in touch with the director of Delta Waterfowl at that time. It was Todd Arnold. And then, before and after, it was Frank Rower in terms of the science director, and got me on a summer project with Dr. Ken Richgis now, who leads migratory birds for Fish and Wildlife Service, was doing his PhD on pintails in Saskatchewan. And that was my first summer project working with waterfowl. And it was like everything I had prepared myself for in life was happening. And that was the launching point for me to pursue a master's degree supported by both Delta Waterfowl and Ducks Unlimited in Manitoba, near Erickson, Manitoba, just north of the famed Minnedosa. And I got to work on lesser scott. That was the species that I grew up in Minnesota hearing the stories of the glory days from my father. Oh, back in the day, they used to just pour through here by the millions. And you should have seen it. And I would read Sports Afield magazine articles by Jimmy Robinson talking about the flights of bluebills and cans and the old days. But when I started hunting, it was the drought of the 1980s. And there were fewer birds. There had already been a lot of alteration to wetlands in Minnesota, one of which is probably a lot more minnows and fish in wetlands and a lot more runoff in wetlands than there used to be. And I think it was a combination of fewer birds and more birds shifting their migration westward to the Dakotas. So I grew up duck hunting in lean times, bag limits of 3, and that rarely happened. I got hooked on it, but I always was thinking about these stories of the glory days and how the bird that fueled Minnesota waterfowlers was the bluebill, the lesser and greater scott. And I think it's that experience that got me into thinking about conservation and management. What could I learn to hopefully someday shed some light on how we might reverse that pattern for that species and many other species? And I don't think without that experience that I would have found that path, especially the particular one I took. And that during my master's degree is when I really sparked the light of the questions. I got hooked on the questions and I wanted to keep pursuing research. I went down to Auburn, Alabama to pursue my PhD at Auburn University with Dr. Barry Gran, but we actually worked on issues in Alaska. We started working on the population dynamics of many Alaskan waterfowl species. So I went way down to the deep south to do work in Alaska, which was a nice refresher in the summers from the heat. Worked a lot on existing data, but Barry always saw the light that you're never going to understand the data unless you're in the system. And he got me out into the North Slope of Alaska, helping out with field work, the Copper River Delta, and that opened up my eyes even further. From there, some smart mentors once said that you'll learn more if you gain a flyway experience, and to move around can be beneficial. And I saw an opportunity to do a postdoc in Germany at a Max Planck Institute for demographic research. And demography is basically the study of birth rates, death rates, immigration, and emigration rates. That's what I had already been interested in when studying waterfowl. But this was to look at it across the tree of life. And I jumped at that opportunity, went across the big pond, the Atlantic, to do some postdoctoral research in Germany, was able to, on the side, get exposed to waterfowl researchers over there. It wasn't part of my job, but it got me into venues that I wouldn't have seen, other flyways I wouldn't have seen. And I think that collection of experiences is what made me competitive for my first academic job at Utah State University. I spent 10 years there, moving from assistant to associate professor. And also I had the good fortune of getting involved with Dr. Rocky Rockwell, who was on my PhD committee, but invited me to become part of the long-term research on lesser snow geese at La Perouse Bay in Manitoba. And I spent 7 years there studying snow goose population dynamics, their overabundance, their impacts on the ecosystem in the Arctic. Also doing some work with common eiders adjacent to the snow goose colony. And it's ever since then, it's sort of, I've been moving around, moving with the birds, moving with the problems, and was extremely happy with where I was in Utah. But a couple of years ago, James C. Kennedy, or Jim Kennedy, continued his mission to bring back waterfowl research to academia. It, along with hunters, had been disappearing in academia. And following suit with what he did at Mississippi State University, Clemson University, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, he established an endowed waterfowl chair at Colorado State University in collaboration with the Warner College of Natural Resources at Colorado State to establish an endowed program where a professor position would exist in perpetuity to focus on waterfowl ecology and management. And there would be some assistance there to keep students focused on those topics as well, namely graduate students, but also undergraduates involved in undergraduate research. And also, Jim Kennedy realized the need for outreach. And this university hunting program has become really our flagship outreach program. It's something that doesn't traditionally fit classroom lecture types of settings, but it is that connection between the citizen science hunter and the management that is so necessary. And that's what we're going to talk more about today. I guess that's how I've gotten from birth to where I am. And then just 2 days ago behind me right here.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's quite a journey. I've known you for quite some time, and it's definitely a Delta connection. You know, I think it'll be 20 years starting in March. Rachel, I'm feeling advanced in my career when I say that, but I'm not. I'm only 46, so I'm doing fine. But thanks for that, Dave. That's really good. Rachel, tell us about yourself. Where are you from? Tell us about what your upbringing and what you're doing now.
So I grew up in rural Michigan, and I also came from a hunting family. My dad was big into it, and I kind of just followed in his footsteps. Quite literally, my mom used to dress me up in a big orange snowsuit when I would get home from school, and I would toddle my way out to wherever my dad was sitting in his tree stand, and I would just like track him through the snow. So that was kind of fun growing up. And then from there, I went and did my undergrad at Adrian College in Michigan, and I triple majored in environmental science, biology, and English. And then I still wasn't sure exactly what path I wanted to go, so I started reaching out to different grad schools to potentially find an advisor. And in the meantime, I got a summer job working with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources as a summer tech. And I got to do a lot of hands-on experience there, some working with food plots and doing bear surveys. And we actually did a little bit with geese as well. And I got to help band for a time with that. So that was really cool. And then that just made me really feel engaged in the outdoor opportunities as a potential career. So from that point, I wanted to explore wildlife a little bit more in grad school. And then I was able to connect with an advisor, Dr. Lise Aubrey at Colorado State University. And she and I just hit it off from the beginning, and it seemed like a good match. So I decided to head on out to Colorado and started my master's degree there. And I'm currently studying ground squirrels, of all things. And I'm looking at survival and how behavior is affected by hormones. So it's kind of a neat experience there that I'm going through. And I'm in my third year right now, and I should be wrapping up come spring. And then after that, I'm not sure exactly where I'll head out, but I would like to work with a nonprofit organization in the hunting community of some kind. So that's kind of where I've come from and where I am now.
That's cool. So I'm from Wisconsin, so we basically have those 3 states well covered. So that's pretty good. So one thing, Rachel, though, I think I recall Dave telling me that while your family hunted, you just described that your dad hunted, and those are some great memories. You didn't try it yourself as a child, or did you?
So I did hunt big game when I was a kiddo, but I never did the bird side of things. I did hunt turkeys, I think twice, but other than that, I never had an opportunity to do the waterfowl or upland game birds or anything in that regard. So that was a whole new experience that I got to experience for the first time because of Delta last year when I participated in the university hunting program.
Sounds good. Sounds really good. Well, again, thank you guys for the introductions. I think before we jump in and talk about the university hunting program and what it is and what it's seeking to remedy, there's this backdrop of a steady and ongoing decline in hunter participation in general. I think pretty much everybody's familiar with that. There are perhaps certain segments of hunting that are enjoying increases in hunting participation, but certainly hunting in general has been on a decline, and that's been a huge concern. Waterfowl hunter numbers, if you compare it from the heyday of the 1970s to today, we've lost roughly half of our continental waterfowl hunter population. So as duck people, that's a big concern. And are you guys are familiar with R3? The term R3? Okay, so that's the buzzword: recruitment, retention, and reactivation. It's pretty amazing. It's an emerging field. Rachel, you just said that you'd be interested in working in hunting in the future, and so a lot of states and nonprofit organizations have dedicated positions to try to arrest and reverse that decline, add hunters to the fold. You know, we could talk for a very long time about why are hunters declining, and I'm just going to summarize it with a few things. And not any one of them is the only reason. You could talk about urbanization. You could talk about that disconnect from nature, that rural perspective to an urban perspective. We could talk about aging hunters. It's amazing. There's a group of hunters that dominate the license pool that are, in their 50 to 60 years of age and older. And what's happened is they simply have not replaced themselves. If everyone's replaced themselves one for one, the 1970s would be the 2020s for sure, but that's not the case. And the other distinction to point out is that largely it's not a resource-driven decline, right? Dave, we've experienced phenomenal fall flights of ducks over the last decade, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, in terms of numbers for most species, it is the good old days right now.
Yeah, it certainly is. Whitetail deer, on and on and on. You could do lots of success stories. So, we start to talk about things like access, access to quality hunting. And you kind of tipped on that a little bit, Dave, about, using an outfitter to provide a quality experience for your students to show how good it can be, what's out there.
Yeah, could I elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah.
I think depending on the state you live in, but in a lot of states I've lived in, if you were to go and ask a waterfowl hunter who is not really knowledgeable of the data on licensed waterfowl hunters, and you said, do you know there's a lot fewer of us now than there used to be? They'd probably say you're crazy. Mm-hmm. Because they're hunting at a public hunting area that's getting a lot of pressure. And over there, especially if you're talking to folks who are, say, in their 40s or younger, they'll say, over my lifetime, I've been seeing increasing pressure on the areas that I like to go to or that I try to go to. And because of that pressure is an increasing frustration, because you're going there to experience the outdoors, not competing with other people. Some of them, just might not be respecting the resource like you. That creates further frustration. They might be sky busting. They might be, setting up right on top of you. And I think that what you're seeing in parallel with what are real decreases in waterfowl hunter numbers is decreasing access. That's not necessarily a decrease in public land. I think the majority of that is the decrease in access to private lands. Traditionally, in a less populated continent and a higher fraction of rural citizens, it was commonplace to be able to go knock on the farmer's door and say, hey, I noticed that, last night there were some ducks and or geese on your farm pond or in your field. Would you mind if I went out tomorrow and hunted them? And they said, oh, by all means. It was, and they enjoyed having a chat. They enjoyed seeing someone, because in rural areas and in farm landscapes, they might not see too many outsiders all the time. And it also established these kind of nice personal relationships. But over time, that is eroded. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's abuse of those lands by hunters. There's also, industrialization of farming. More and more, that farm field is owned by a corporation, and it's no longer a farm field. It's a township that's right. Being worked. You'll see this in Saskatchewan, I'm sure in parts of North Dakota too, where you live now, Joel. The fence rows have gone away. The households have gone away. And sometimes it's hard to find the landowner, even the leasee. The rural landscape has changed in parallel with the urban landscape. Collectively, there's fewer places to go, and the pressure is high, and it becomes more and more difficult, not impossible, to find a really quality hunting experience on public lands. But that depends on where you live. Some states have a lot more public wetland areas than others per capita. Where we live here in Colorado, this time of year, there are large numbers of waterfowl staging along the North Platte River and the adjacent wetlands. There are public hunting areas right on the North Platte River, predominantly in some wetlands, but they get pressured very, very hard. And if you put in your time and your experience and put in all your savvy, you can find some good days of duck hunting for sure. That takes, as anyone, an experienced waterfowler knows, it's a lifelong learning experience of how to become more and more savvy, address the mistakes, and figure it out. And in a competitive environment, the bar is set even higher. So with our university hunting program, trying to think about how to expose students to a quality experience where they'll be able to see a lot of wildlife, experience their behaviors, setting out decoys, seeing how they work, how the calling works, and seeing some birds, we decided that it's best to collaborate with our outfitter, Luke Schmidt, who's more than generous with his time, because he's a passionate member of Delta Waterfowl. He's a passionate promoter of R3, and he wants to see a future generation of waterfowl and wildlife conservationists as well. I do remind the students, though, that their first experience might not be what their future experiences are. They have it good sometimes. It's hunting, though. Even though you go with an outfitter, it's not limits every year, because of the weather affects things and the bird's behavior affects things just like anywhere. But it increases our odds of at least not having people barking down our backs per se. And admittedly, it can be pretty awesome.
Yeah, no.
And I think that is, there is that aspect that's probably going to take a while to ever see something potentially that good again. But we also want to get people hooked as well, because if you think about a deer hunt as an example, more than likely your first time out, you're not going to get anything. You might not even see anything.
Right.
Growing up deer hunting in Minnesota, I never drew a doe tag. I never saw a buck sitting in my stand. Mm-hmm. I saw a lot of does. My heart got pumping. I went to school in Montana and had, deer meat and elk meat every year. It got me hooked. But that my father was a part of that as well. And so we want to connect those dots, harvest some game, clean that game, and go and eat it. This is the most sustainable aspect of eating food. It brings that connection to, I think, our hunter-gatherer origins. And no matter who you are, if you're a part of that, there's some hairs that stick up on your back, your heart gets thumping. There's this inner human being that gets ignited when you pursue game and you eat the game that you harvested. I think same thing goes in a fashion when you're a gardener as well.
Absolutely. It's nice to know where the food on your table comes from, and I'm really pumped that you're able to offer that experience there at Colorado State. So I call it building a trap or a funnel. And so, as we move towards maybe a more meaty discussion about the university hunting program, I think it's important to back up again a little bit to R3. So that's the recruitment, retention, and reactivation of hunters, new, current, and past hunters. So if you look backwards, the overwhelming majority of R3 programs have been focused on youth, take kids hunting. And I understand why that's the case. It feels good. Hunting is typically something, and Dave, that's the case for you, and Rachel, your first introduction to hunting was through your father, mine as well. And so typically hunting has been a hand-me-down activity. It's grandparents to parents to children to grandchildren. But for a lot of people, that's broken. And that's, to me, one of the main reasons why hunting has been on the decline. It's just the world's changed. I think it's tougher. People are more active. And so the natural attention has gone to kids. But rightfully so, over the last, I'm going to say, half a decade, the attention has shifted towards adults. And I like it. And that doesn't mean shift away from youth. But what that means is if someone holds a hunter recruitment program, an event, and it's nothing but kids, if those kids come from non-hunting families, if they don't have access to a mentor in their home life, you can get them excited about hunting, but the odds of them becoming a hunter over the next 10 years is an experiment, right? Because you're going to send them back home into that same environment. So if you're going to do youth recruitment, like some of Delta Waterfowl chapters do, we say, you either have to take on more of a big brothers, big sisters approach and take on an individual and stick with it for a year, or target the entire family. Teach them all to hunt, and then they can go do it together. I think what a better Friday night activity, right, Rachel, is to go hunting.
Absolutely.
That's right. So shifting to adults, though, that 18 to 30 years of age is something that I'm really focused on, that Delta's really focused on, as are most R3 organizations out there. They focus on college-aged people because they have a car, they have independence, they have some money. If you teach them to hunt, they can go. They can recruit their friends. Rachel, you can recruit, some of your friends from college that might take an interest in hunting, and they'll accept an invite that you extend to them. And honestly, we can reestablish that hand-me-down tradition because that college-age individual probably doesn't have children yet. They're probably not married. So when they do have their own family, they can teach their own kids how to hunt. And so that's why I'm passionate about that early adulthood demographic, which is exactly what we're talking about with the university hunting program. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I have to concur with everything you've said and agree that it totally is a lot more fun for me to have those connections through my university where I can know people that want to go out hunting. And through the Delta hunt that I went on, I made new friends, and not just for hunting, but I made friends that we continue to go skiing together. And then we have gone hunting, and we've planned big game hunts together, and we're going to go bird hunting again. And so it's nice to see that kind of continue. And then other people have seen that and recognized the value that I take in going hunting and have asked to join. And that's a really cool feeling to be able to share that with the other people that I care about in other realms of my life as well. That's
exciting, and that's music to my ears. That It's a very inspiring thought for me to keep this thing going. Dave, we're going to jump into your world real quick. So the university hunting program, it's absolutely an R3 program, but it's more than that. It's an added layer that I think most college programs can't have, simply because this program is focused on wildlife students, right? Wildlife or natural resources students, future wildlife managers. So Dave, I think when you and I probably started college, for me, 1992, so I guess we are out in that 20, 25 years ago, all of the people that I hung out with, that I was aware of, they hunted, right? So everyone I knew hunted. And coincidentally, we've canvassed quite a few professors from these prominent wildlife universities, and 20 to 25 years ago, roughly 80% of wildlife students then were hunters. And so, like your story, Dave, and mine, and Rachel, hunting was, at least it was, I'm going to speak for myself, it's what led me into, dedicating my professional life to wildlife conservation and wildlife management. So 80% hunted, 20% did not. There's always been a non-hunting demographic in wildlife university students. But if you fast forward to today, there's an alarming statistic. At least it's alarming to me, and I suspect it's alarming to most. It's pretty much flipped on end. The statistic that professors that I've talked to continually cite in their university is roughly 70% of their students who want to be a wildlife manager or have some type of conservation position don't have a hunting background. They don't hunt. Their family didn't hunt. They really don't have a grounded opinion or experience in hunting. Are you seeing that there, Dave?
Oh yeah. And I like the 80% reference, that historically maybe 80% of wildlife majors grew up hunting or were exposed to it, because I don't know the exact number. You'd have to do a survey, but I could easily say that of our 600 undergraduate majors in fish, wildlife, and conservation biology, that 80% of them do not currently and actively hunt. Maybe upwards of 90%. And the backgrounds from which our students come from are obviously different than historically with reference to hunting, but also, there's the urban-rural gradient, and there's different things bringing them to this major. So the cool thing is they're interested in wildlife. I mean, we don't want to shun that, but they're coming with different sets of experiences. And that is why, for example, Rachel described her background, and that's why when we see future leaders in wildlife, when we think of this R3 program, not just recruitment, we think of it as R3, maybe even R4. I reached out to Rachel asking her, because I thought there's also lateral recruitment. If we've got someone hooked on some aspect of hunting, say growing up deer hunting in Michigan, but they're going to have a career in wildlife, let's get them exposed to the other aspects as well and the different dimensions of it. We also have students who, this is very common, they went hunting once or twice as a youth, but haven't gone since then. They're now in university, and some of their friends do now, but they're not going to go unless there's a kind of a open invitations multiple times. So we see that as a reactivation opportunity, while providing some big open hands, a big program. We're gonna take you from every step of the way with education, hunter safety, and then provide you an outstanding experience. But we also have had participants who are truly being recruited into this. So we have a diversity of experiences, a diversity of backgrounds. What's the dilemma? Some students are coming into the major. They're not really interested in managing game species per se. They might be interested in conserving non-game species, imperiled species. And you might then ask, what is the need to be exposed to the game management side of the coin? And one argument would be that there is a ton of conservation bycatch with habitat that is put out there for game species by hunters that indirectly benefits massively non-game species, especially on private lands. Most of our continent's biodiversity makes their life on private lands. And most of the conservation of habitat on private lands is supported by hunter dollars directly or indirectly, either through a small Pittman-Robertson tax on ammunition, by going to a gas station and paying a tax in a rural area, or more directly by license sales and making a call out to the federal duck stamp. 90 cents of every dollar spent on a duck stamp goes directly into habitat management. That is one of the most efficient conservation bangs for your buck ever. Turns out a lot of that's conserving and managing wetlands, and wetlands support a lot of non-game biodiversity, from plants to invertebrates to non-waterfowl vertebrates. So even if your interest is to pursue conservation of non-game species, once you learn about the aspects of biology and habitat management and habitat needs, there's very little life on this continent that right now does not benefit from the hunter conservationists. Now, that's not to say that down the road, someone else will step up monetarily to provide that need. But that's probably a long, slow trek, and who knows, we might not get there. We don't live in that world right now. We live in a world with fewer hunters that are dropping away quickly. Along with it, their voice, which is huge, their dollars, their voice on Capitol Hill is above and beyond the direct dollars. Mm-hmm. And so that's this issue. This is why R3 programs like Delta's R3 program are so critical. And I think all aspects of those R's cannot be forgotten. There's another angle to this. There's a huge opportunity. I don't think we should denigrate people coming into wildlife from different backgrounds. It brings this enormous diversity of backgrounds, diverse ways of thinking, diverse life experiences, that providing them some insight into what hunting is about and how it benefits conservation of all species, we're able to maybe potentially harness a huge opportunity here. Yeah, more folks are coming from an urban background, but they're coming with these different experiences. And if we can provide them a positive outlook on the role of hunting and management, we might multiplicatively have a huge impact. Maybe they're not going to go on and be a waterfowl hunter. That's okay. But if they understand that role, they're likely to make a decision that is positive and promotional of maintaining and growing the hunting lifestyle and hunting conservation in North America into the future. So I'd like to look at it as a program that not only gets more hunters involved and their direct support, but it gets more people open to that, so that when they're making decisions, that they're viewing hunting conservation as that what it is. It's conservation, and that we need that to support the North American model of wildlife conservation. And as that evolves, we still need it. It still needs to be part of the palette.
I love, Dave, that you said that better than I could. That's props to you. That's.
I think if I rehearsed it, I couldn't have said it like that. Well, I just believe it.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's amazing. I look at a manager of pick anything. Pick a big game biologist, pick a waterfowl biologist, pick a wildlife professor like yourself, Dave. Look at the multiplier effect that any one of those individuals can have over the course of their career. They'll be interacting with thousands of people. And I'm not going to call them closed-minded, but when you come through this program, your mind is open. You do understand that hunters are true conservationists. You understand, whether you do it or not, you understand the value. We can dispel some myths. We can empower people to go out there and make a difference and share the good word. Hopefully hunting themselves. Me, selfishly, I want to see every single one of our students go hunting when they're done with this experience. Rachel, I want to switch to you. Dave and I sit here, and Dave's closer to the ground than I am. But so you're there, student on campus. You have friends. I'm assuming that hunt and don't hunt. Does anything that we're telling you, that we're saying, does it resonate with you? Or are you nodding your head when we're saying a few of these things, what you're seeing on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel as though there are fewer people in the program who do hunt. And it's exciting when I run into people that do. When I did my undergrad, I didn't have a lot of friends that hunted in my university. So it was exciting to come to Colorado and start at CSU and have some students in my department. And then it was even more exciting to find out that there are people outside of my department and just outside of the university that are still my age that want to engage in hunting. And my first year out here, I didn't really know how to get started hunting. So I didn't go that first year and kind of just met people and got connections. And then my second year, I found a mentor who took me out hunting for mule deer, and that was exciting. And then I was able to participate in the goose hunt, and that really got me excited about hunting. And then I met more people that had similar interests, and so that kind of propelled me into the year that I have now, where I was able to get a couple different big game tags. I want to do more waterfowl hunting. When I went back to visit my family in Michigan, we went on a goose hunt there with some other friends that I had met in Colorado that happened to have family out here as well in Michigan. So it's been really cool to have these connections that have just really blossomed into something so much more. But I do see that there is a lack of people that are engaged in hunting. And it is sad to see sometimes, but it's also exciting when people are open to experiences. Like you mentioned, sometimes we come across people who don't understand hunting or that perspective. And it's very exciting when you're able to open someone's eyes to that, even if you don't know it. For example, I had a roommate that didn't really have an interest in hunting at all. She still doesn't really have an interest in hunting, but she is so excited about eating game meat. And every time I get something, a new critter, she wants to try it. So this year I got a pronghorn in Colorado, and she's been so excited asking me if she can try it. And when I shot my goose, she was so excited that she wanted to try that. And she's had a lot of exposure because of that. And recently, she even admitted that it changed her viewpoint on hunting in general and gun rights. And not because I went out of my way to try to argue my position, but simply because I was able to have conversations with her and share my passion, and she saw that. And so that was really exciting for me. And I think if we can continue to have, like Dave said, this sort of lateral transition of having people engage in hunting, then we can continue to spread it so that even people who aren't engaged in the activity that we love, they have a respect for those of us that do engage in that. And I think that's pretty special.
That is special. Rachel, I have to point out how, for me, how well spoken you are about this. It obviously comes from, we haven't talked about this. You and I, this is the first time that we've met each other. So this is something that you're obviously passionate about. It's something that you must think about this, right?
Yes, thank you. It's very exciting for me, and I just really enjoy being able to share something like this. And I think it's pretty unique that we all can come together and we all have different backgrounds, but also can share in that and just have a conversation like this and share what we enjoy so much.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think there's an aspect of this that you've reminded me of that I too often forget. I think in life, we too often think of things from our own perspective. Well, I hunted all the way through college. My friends were hunters, so we hunted. We went home on the weekends. We hunted during the week. But I think a lot of students, especially Rachel from Colorado to Michigan, college is a vulnerable time for an individual that hunted, in their home, in their upbringing. But you get into college, that's a pretty fragile time period where it'd be pretty easy to disconnect yourself from hunting. And then you get into your first jobs, and then years down the road, you settle into your family life and you say, maybe this is something I want to pick up again. So to hear you being able to stay engaged with hunting, with the connections you've made through this program, are just other hunters that you were able to meet, and the opinions you were able to sway just by being you. I think that's something to be proud of as well.
Thank you. I do appreciate the reactivation as well, because during my undergrad, I did get away from hunting a little bit. And then, like I said, when I came out to Colorado and started making more of these connections, it really reactivated my desire for it and got me excited in a whole new way. So that was cool as well.
Great. So we've been talking about this university hunting program like it's a mythical creature, a snuffleupagus of sorts, but it's a real thing, right? And so I want to share with everybody what it is. But before I get there, I do need to throw credit where credit is due. The university hunting program is not a Delta invention. This exact type of program was run at 2 universities that I'm aware of. And Dave, if there's others, please let me know. But, Dr. John Eady at UC Davis it's a historical program, and he runs a program similar to identical to this for years out in California. And then actually Delta's president, Dr. Frank Rohr, who you name dropped before, when he was a professor at Louisiana State University, before coming to Delta full time, he ran an identical program. And I remember when he came here full time, he said, "Joel, we need to do a program like this." And it took me a little bit to warm up to it, because I'll be honest with you, I thought all wildlifers hunt, right? And then my mind started softening to the idea, and I fell in love with it. And so it's a really, done right, it's an immersive experience. It's a semester-long experience. And I would say, Dave, it can't be done without a professor contact like yourself, because ideally, you have a group of students that you're interacting with regularly in the classroom, and then we add some outside aspects. So, you're talking about things like the North American model of conservation. You're talking about the fair chase ethic. You talk about, you mentioned the federal duck stamp, and where those dollars go, and those are hunter-generated dollars. You shine a light on declining hunter participation. So that's awesome. That's everything a wildlife manager needs to have. Future wildlife manager needs to have. You need to have that background. But what the program brings as an added layer is a trial experience. It starts with hunter education. So ideally, the participants are aware of hunting. They've never done it. So they probably don't have a hunter education. So a course is organized, or they're told, if you want to do this, go get your hunter education card. Go get certified. So they obtain hunter ed. And then if they haven't fired a shotgun before, for a safety perspective and a proficiency perspective, it's a great idea to go to a trap range once or twice, shoot and successfully break some clay pigeons in preparation for a duck hunt. And then, Dave, you talked about the goose hunt that you went on. That's the feature opportunity that you guys have available to you there at Fort Collins. But ideally, it all ends with why we all hunt in the first place. And that, yes, it's friends and family, and it's getting outdoors, but at the end of the day, it's about food. Hunting is ultimately about food. And I don't feel guilty about all the other pleasures of hunting. I love it all. But at the end of the day, I love to eat it. And so we love for these programs to culminate with a game feed, right? And so you bring in the social aspects, the camaraderie. We teach everybody how to properly cook wild game, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there about wild game doesn't taste well. In my opinion, it just wasn't cooked well. But to me, that's the well-rounded experience. It's the in-class, it's the out-of-class experience. And Dave, can you talk to us about what this type of experience has meant to you personally, like the professional rewards, the personal rewards?
Until recently, I didn't have a position that provided me this opportunity to get involved with outreach opportunities like this. So I just feel so fortunate in a busy academic schedule to have this be part of my job. Until Delta reached out to talk about getting this program up and going in Colorado, I'll admit I never recruited or reacted. Well, might have reactivated a few hunters, but I never recruited hunters in my lifetime. The only time when I might have reactivated a few was in college. I had buddies, beer drinking buddies, who might have hunted a little bit, and I say, "Hey, do you want to go out duck hunting?" And we would make a plan to do that a few days later. But I think I honestly took it for granted most of my career, and now being part of this program with Delta, it's honestly opened up a whole nother dimension of my career, and it's enormously satisfying. I have a lovely wife and two little ones, and they're too little to hunt right now, but it already gets me thinking, okay, how do I make this right? And get them exposed and involved in their future lives. The older one's already fishing and is hooked on it, so I don't think it'll be too challenging. But it gave me that hindsight perspective. I had the good fortune of just growing up the traditional hunter way in a family that was passionate about it. I realized it set my career on a path, and now I'm seeing the light of that. I need to give back a little way in that, and I have time in my kind of roles here, in this fortunate endowed position made possible by Jim Kennedy, to commit time to doing this, and it's enormously rewarding. I don't know if you caught it in the beginning of this video, but when I talk about this, I get tears, because this experience is just, like you said, Joel, eating it. It's that visceral experience of just being human. And when you see that spark lit in someone else when they're cleaning game and they said, that was a fun hunt, I'm more excited now to go and eat the food I harvested. There's that locavore in them. And it's just so neat to see someone else have that passion be lighted, because it was many years ago when it was lighted for many of us. So it's hard to put words behind, but it's
I think you're back, Dave. We lost you for a second there.
No.
Dang it. Yeah, for everyone that's just listening, this is Zoom. We're relying on the internet, but I think it's been performing admirably so far. But one little glitch. But you just said that this had been lit for you a long time ago, and so you're getting to pass that on.
And getting that passed on is just enormously rewarding. Yeah.
That's awesome. Rachel, so you said that your father introduced you to hunting. You've continued hunting through college. Sounds like it's partly because of this opportunity, but tell us, how has the university hunting program impacted you as a person, but then also elaborate on that, on how it's shaped your future career visions or aspirations. How has this molded you as a future professional?
Yeah, so as I alluded to a little bit earlier, it has shaped me in terms of how I've hunted with other people by building those connections and just building some friendships amongst other students. And I would say that prior to that, it's mostly been hunting with my dad and his buddies and people like that. And so it was exciting to come out here and meet people that want to do similar things when I'm in a place that is new to me, and I can meet new people that way who share something that we're all similarly excited about. So I think that that's definitely how the program has helped me within the university, to just get to know people outside of my department, outside of just grad schools, get to meet undergrads. And then Dave gave me the opportunity this year to help with the program that's happening, the hunt that they did this year when they went to the range. I was very excited to get to go out and help some people learn how to shoot for the first time. And that was exciting for me too. And that carries over into where I want to go in my future. And I definitely want to help to continue helping people learn about how to get engaged in these sort of activities and help them experience things for the first time. And I have a neighbor that has recently started talking to me about getting hunter safety, and he just finished his first course, and now he wants to talk about going and looking at guns and what one might be a good choice and when we could go and all sorts of things. So it's really exciting to be a part of that. And seeing the way that people get so excited trying things for the first time and getting to experience hunts like this makes me want to do that as a career. And I want to continue to help people be able to enjoy that all sorts of different levels. So I think ideally, upon graduation, I would like to work for some sort of nonprofit organization. And it's really been a great experience to learn about Delta waterfowl because I didn't know a whole lot about them prior to this. I didn't know a whole lot about the waterfowl side as a whole. And so this has been a great experience to learn about this side of hunting because prior to that, I mostly focused on big game animals and a little bit with the small game. So this was very cool for me to be able to interact with waterfowl and learn a whole different side and gain a new appreciation that way.
That's really cool. Rachel, when do you expect to graduate?
In spring of 21.
Okay, so we're going to do a shout out to anybody who might have an R3 position opening up next spring. Rachel's going to graduate and she wants a job. So reach out to any one of us and we'll get you in contact with Rachel. So that's pretty cool. Now, so we had mentioned that at individual universities, this type of effort was taking place. LSU, UC Davis. What Delta hitched its wagon to was, so LSU wanted to deliver it, so they delivered it at LSU. UC Davis at UC Davis. What Delta, the continental reach that we have and presence that we have, we decided that what we were going to do was we were going to make this, again, one of our core and feature programs. We were going to propagate this idea. Interestingly enough, Dave and Rachel, we've identified 445 candidate universities spread across the U.S. and Canada. It's, I don't know, I wasn't expecting that, so there, and we tiered them, tier 1 through 5 in terms of priority. And so there are, the traditional prominent hook and bullet wildlife institutions on down to maybe some more peripheral institutions. But we started this in 2017. We had 5 universities participate. Last fall, we had 24. That was a big jump from 5 to 24. And we do have a stated goal of getting this program out to every one of those 445 universities, whether it's something that Delta is a part of, or whether whether that type of effort occurs there before Delta becomes involved. It's critical. It's important for all these students in the natural resources field to be aware of hunting and hopefully have that trial opportunity. One little note of success, we bring surveying to this program. There's the pre-survey at the beginning of the semester, there's the post at the end of the semester, and then there's a 3-month follow-up survey. So we want to learn about who the participants are, how they felt about the experience, but then the follow-up is, did they keep hunting or did they not? And if they didn't keep hunting, we wanted to understand what were the barriers for that continuation. I was shocked. We learned that 93% of the participants from last fall continued hunting on their own without this organized, scheduled mentorship experience. So it appears to me that there's some magic where the students going to these universities, they already love the outdoors, and they've already committed to a future in conservation in the outdoors. And so sprinkle in a hunting opportunity, and it appears to be magic. 93% follow-up hunters. I was blown away by that. Dave, I see you're on mute. What is it? What do you think about that?
I'm equally shocked. I kind of, you hope you're gonna hook some, but that's an amazingly high number. And it just goes to show how these experiences must be pretty solid experiences to really excite people. And I mean, I'm biased, but I think that's why I'm so drawn to waterfowl hunting, because it's just so full of fun action and so much wildlife. I think I don't know if you'd see that percent if they were going out to pursue squirrels or something.
Yeah, I do. I'm biased. I work for a waterfowl organization, but I hunt everything I can get my hands on. I literally do. And at the end of the day, as a father of two, I have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. So, like you, Dave, I'm constantly, my brain is grinding. How do I make this a positive experience? I hope, like heck, that this is something that I can do with my kids well into their adulthood. But at the end of the day, I think waterfowl hunting is, whether you're a waterfowl hunter yourself, whether that becomes your game of choice or not, I think waterfowl hunting is probably the best mentorship opportunity. It's safe. You can set it up. You can put one shell in the gun, and you can shoot and shoot and shoot. Get something, get nothing. You can be successful. You can do it the next day and the day after that. So it's a, you can bring food. I haven't been a part of this, but I hear others at Delta talk about these duck blinds that they get into, typically in the South, where there's lots of hunters. There's stoves. They're cooking breakfast. There's lights. I can't even fathom it. But it's such a social opportunity, and it's a safe opportunity. Pick the right weather, you'll have luck, and it's the way to go. Rachel, with the types of hunting that you've done, where do you rank waterfowl hunting? Not in your favorite, but in terms of mentorship quality.
I think it's a perfect opportunity for the university type because it enables you to connect with people. You don't have to sit there in total silence. You can have a chit chat with your neighbor while you're waiting for the birds to come in. While you're setting up, you can talk about how excited you are for what's happening. And then when you're helping take down, you can talk about like what was working and what wasn't. And I think it's just a good opportunity to have camaraderie and really connect with people, and you build relationships beyond just the hunting experience. So you start talking about other little things that you've experienced, like what other activities are people interested in, and then you can build on that and you find common ground, and that enables you to come back to hunting as something that's already established as a route that you can connect with people. So then if you do go out, like I mentioned earlier, I go skiing with some of the people that I went on my university hunt with. And then because of that, we stay in touch during the seasons that might not be hunting season. And then when hunting season rolls back around, we get back in touch again. And that's exciting. And you're just able to build so much more of a relationship with people. So I think that absolutely the waterfowl side of it is a great time to be able to introduce people to hunting. And like you mentioned, you can take multiple shots and people are shooting at the same time. So even if you miss, your buddy might get one, and it's still just like a joy the whole time that you're doing it.
That's right. And on top of it, you bring a deer back to the dorm. Where the heck are you going to store that, right? You can fit some duck breasts.
I invested in a chest freezer.
Did you? Yeah, that's good. But yeah, I can't imagine fitting a whole deer in that little college dorm freezer. I just don't think you can do it. You'd have to give it away or eat it really fast. So yeah, another plus for waterfowl hunting. But I think we did a really nice coverage of the subject. Is there anything before we wrap up that either one of you would like to add that you think we missed or wanted to highlight?
Nothing I can think of, Joel. I just wanted to thank you and thank Delta for this opportunity, not only to establish these programs, but to talk about it. It's just a neat experience.
Awesome.
I would echo Dave in saying that this has just been a really great opportunity for me just to see what R3 is all about, both from being involved in it myself and then learning about career opportunities beyond that, and just coming full circle and being able to connect my hunting experience that I've had and just gain a broader perspective all the way around. So thank you. And thanks to Delta for this. It's been really great.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, this has been inspiring for me. It really has. So I guess as we wrap up, I'm going to say thanks to Dave and thanks to Rachel for jumping in. If you have any questions for either one of them, reach out to Delta, reach out to me, and I'll make sure to get you their contact information. I should ask, is that okay?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I guess that would be the right thing to do. So, as always, for our listeners, if you have any ideas for future show ideas that you'd like us to cover, a future podcast episode, send them on in. If you have any questions about today's podcast, send those in as well. You can find my email address on the staff portion of our website, or send it in to usa@deltawaterfowl.org. And if you're a college student at a university or a professor at a university and you think, yeah, I'd love to have this established at my university, again, please reach out and give me a call. Delta has resources. We help with equipment. We help with insurance coverage. We have volunteers in most parts of the United States and Canada that can help with that trap shooting opportunity or help with the mentored hunt. We're here for you. So please reach out. Until next time, everybody get out there. It's fall. There should be a hunting season going on for no matter who is listening to this in North America. Bottom line, be safe, have fun, and until next time, thank you.